Hello, everyone. So we're here today with one more episode of Changing the Game. So today I have a very special guest here, Chandra Sundareswaran.
Well done, Wilson.
So here we go. So a very unique surname. So it looks like I'm successful in saying it. So as we always do, Chandra, we start every show asking the guest to talk a little bit about him or herself. So just your story. So you go as long in the past as you want, but tell us, who are you?
Hi, Wilson. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be part of the show. Where do I go? Perhaps I'll start with my education a little bit. I'm an electrical engineer. I did a master's in electrical and computer engineering. And I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I thought I wanted to take that. It was Y2K. Everything was about computers. Everything is about changing. And I said, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. But the theory of it was, I liked science. And I kind of liked maths, but not too much. And the theory of it was interesting. But then the application of it wasn't for me. I did enjoy working with people on projects. So the teamwork aspect of it, I really liked. When I was doing my master's, I was lucky enough to be in a university that had a really good international business school. So I took a fair few units from the international business school as part of my master's in electrical and computer engineering, University of South Carolina. Thank you. But it was great. So it gave me some elements of business that I was like, okay, this is for me. And a friend of mine was setting up an interesting fashion project in India, working with women in slums in Mumbai, trying to find work that could go to the people rather than people going to work, and how we could empower these women. And I said, that sounds interesting. Shall we set up a business and do that? And that was kind of my start, a social enterprise, having no experience in business, never having run a business and doing 2 or 3 units of business. I said, okay, here we go. And that's kind of how I got into entrepreneurship, kind of by action rather than by reading about it. And then one thing led to another. I exited that business about 6 or 7 years later, then went on to work in sustainability, ran a social enterprise in that space, that sector in Melbourne, and then moved to Perth about 7 years ago and came across this amazing organization called Space Cubed. And it was a coffee conversation with Brody, the founder, and before I knew it, I was the furniture and helping out. And what really interested me was Space Cube's interest in social enterprises and entrepreneurship, both of which were passions for me. I really care about how entrepreneurs can change the world and can really have a positive impact. And that was Space Cube's mission as well. So that worked really well. And that's what took me till about 3 months ago. And then this little thing about education that I always worked on, I was always interested in, kind of came back at me, nudging me. And this role came up at Curtin University. And so I said, okay, let's try and work on what the future of education might look like.
So here we go. That's awesome. So I think we couldn't choose a better guest. So, because changing the game, we talk about diversity, education, innovation, and we got such a perfect mix of that in your profile. I'm curious about a few things you just said. So one is welcome to the club of false engineers, I guess. So engineers by education that ended up doing something else. They can empathize with that. So also, many times we talk with students and young people. They're trying to figure out what they want to do, or rather, in my case, even asking my son, what you gonna do? And obviously, in early stages or early ages, we don't know. So it seems like that you went through a little bit of that process. Interesting is that you said something about, can we open a company that do that? So is that concept of open a company is something that was part of that? You talk about University of South Carolina?
Mhm.
So it was part of the ecosystem. Entrepreneurship was something at university.
No. So I did a couple of
Good.
units
That's
in
what I
business, but no, it wasn't. I think it has developed since, but no, it wasn't part of my formal education, if you may. It was more. There was something in the back of my mind that kept saying, "You should be doing something else," and this is what might be of interest. And no, starting a company was nothing. Which is why I made every single mistake in the book. The 6.5 years that I ran my first business. Gosh, if I had a mentor, if I had someone to tell me this is what you should be doing, or if I'd done an MBA, I don't know, I might have done things differently, but then I wouldn't have learned, right?
Absolutely.
But so I had no formal education.
You definitely talk about that sort of social enterprise and your passion and your motivation for that sort of area. So you mentioned about the school at US. So is that where you raised? Where you live in US for study, or you were there before?
I went to study. I grew up in India, in Mumbai.
Okay.
I did my bachelor's in engineering there, and I got a scholarship to go to the University of South Carolina, and that's where I ended up doing my master's. I was the view, and this was the general theme in the 90s. You'd do your bachelor's, you'd go to the US, do your master's, and then you'd find a job in. Google wasn't so big then, so Yahoo was really big then, or Microsoft, that was still around and was still big, and then you'd find your way into
US,
Silicon Valley.
find a job in tech.
Yep.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, how you found Perth?
But Perth is kind of a roundabout way. I came to Perth for love, not for. So, I met my wife about 15 years ago, and she's originally from Perth, and was in Melbourne, working in Melbourne. So that's what took me to Melbourne, and then we had kids, a young family, and Perth's a great place for a young family. It's the lifestyle that brought me to Perth. But when I started looking in and digging into what is around in Perth, and I could see this really interesting tech ecosystem that was just kind of waiting to burst and waiting to emerge, and it was really cool to see that kind of blossom and take shape, and it's still blossoming and taking shape, but it was great to be part of that over the past six and a bit years.
Very nice. So well, that's 8 years so that you have been in Perth. Obviously we all know your name from being connected to SpaceCube, to being the person running SpaceCube in the last few years. So, and you talk about that ecosystem that was blossom and it still is. So, can you tell us your version of it? How you see this ecosystem that is born, is growing, is blossoming? How you say?
Where we are now in 2023 is quite different to the first version of it I saw in 2016. SpaceCube was running the first version of Plus 8. So there was a proper accelerator program for the first time in Perth. And that time, accelerator programs were quite a big thing Australia-wide. There were, I think, about 25 different accelerator programs. Telstra alone ran about 5 of them, and Plus 8 was an affiliate to the Telstra program, Murudi. And so to have an accelerator program in Perth was great. And we were starting to identify some interesting startups that were traditionally just working out of their garages or in their bedrooms or wherever, that were starting to emerge. And the ecosystem itself was starting to take shape. SpaceCube had been running startup weekends for about 3 or 4 years at that point. They'd done a few programs around pre-accelerators. There was Vocus One, a HBF upstart. So all of these kind of areas were just beginning to take shape. Curtin was running Ignition. So there were a number of little programs just kind of surfacing. West Tech Fest was around, and again, was starting to take shape. But then now you look at it, there's about 10 different players, 10 different entities that are or mini ecosystems, if you may. There's the cybersecurity ecosystem, there's a data science ecosystem,
Yep.
there's health sciences and biosciences that's starting to take shape, and then obviously there's the deep tech sector agnostic accelerator programs that SpaceCube runs, but also others that are around. So that's shifted. The venture capital ecosystem has also shifted. Back in the day, there were a couple of VCs that kind of came and went, but there wasn't anything fixed. And I think RAC's Better Labs initiative, the 23 million that they invested, I think was the first big one that was again quite wide in terms of what their investment was. And then now we have a few more funds that are starting to pop up, which is really great. It's starting to see, and like you said earlier, diversity, that is so important. You can't have just one or two big players that are doing everything, and everyone plays their part, everyone plays to their strengths, and that's what makes a really thriving ecosystem.
Very nice. So it's funny for me because you're telling that story, and a movie is going on in my mind. So remember when we started Visage, it was almost 12 years ago. As my first place to go was, let me take a look in the universities where the incubators are, where the accelerators are. I gotta get some support to get started. And to say that there was nothing, there was something going on in the Bentley Park, in the tech park there. So not even in Curtin University. So, and these days, in the last couple of years, so. As a Visage completed 10th anniversary, SpaceCube 10th anniversary, and West Tech Fest 10th anniversary. So it looks like we born all together in the same sort of, so we had all the, while we were busy building the business, so there's all these things pop up, and now we have this sort of thriving ecosystem. Let me ask you a question that might be a little bit, tricky. So one thing that I see in Perth is that we do have all these entities that have been helping to build the ecosystem. Somehow, when we have conversations around, we still talk about the difficulty to operate more in collaboration, right? So maybe have different players building their ecosystems, but not necessarily all integrated. So you might have what's your perception of that?
And I totally get that. I faced exactly that challenge while I was at SpaceCube, and I dare I say it, still face it. One reason in my mind, I think, is the pie is not big enough. So when the pie is big enough, everyone can have a piece of it, and there's more to share.
Yeah.
And because it's still just a blossoming ecosystem, the pie is not big enough. So everyone's trying to make sure that they've got a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most striking contrast between us and even some of the East Coast ecosystems in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
Where there are much bigger pies. There are VCs that have close to $1 billion funds, so that even the startups aren't jostling at one. There's always competition. There's got to be. The best ones have got to win, right? The competition is important, but the pies are bigger.
Yeah.
So everyone's kind of got enough room to move around a little bit, and then the overlaps can happen without people worrying about stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah.
Here, everyone wants to collaborate. You can see that there's this genuine desire and an intent to collaborate, but then they're also a little bit worried about stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah.
And I feel like that it's a bit of walking on eggshells and a little bit of let's play together.
I love the answer.
Yeah.
I love the answer because sometimes it's a question that it's an elephant in the room. So maybe people, I like the way you put. Perception is that everyone want to collaborate, and something hold people back. So, and you put it perfectly. So, you need to grow that pie so everyone can, can reduce those tensions about, being afraid or uncomfortable. That's good. All right, thank you for sharing that. So, you've been since the 4 months, as I understood, that now you are with Curtin University. So you've been talking about the education of the future. So can you walk us a little bit through that theme? So what education of the future looks like?
I can guess. I have no idea because I'd have to be a fortune teller to tell you what it looks like. But there's a few themes that are emerging, and I got interested in education primarily with my role at SpaceCube. I was also looking after the work that we did as part of SpaceCube Foundation, which is focused on entrepreneurship and youth entrepreneurship. And that got me involved in a couple of organizations, a couple of schools that were doing things differently. Idea Academy, and you've spoken to Beck and Nick, and All Saints, and a few schools were thinking differently about what high school education might look like to bring the best out of every student. Because fundamentally, everyone agreed and accepts that the form of education that we had or we have in high schools is stuck in the 50s. It's stuck from what we needed to do to create factory workers. So we had to create something that was structured in a way that would create great factory workers, and it worked. And we've created a great workforce of 4.5 billion people around the globe using that structure. But now it's changing, and obviously we're not making things in factories like we used to. We still do, but there's a lot of robots there. So there needs to be a shift, and also I think there's a parallel phenomenon that's emerging, that's millennials and Gen Alphas, the digital natives that just kind of think a little bit differently to the Gen X's and the Gen Ys. And the boomers, there just seems to be like almost a bit of a jump in evolution, with these digital natives.
That's good.
And they want education. They want learning on demand. They want it now, and they don't want to spend 3 to 5 years at a university, I believe, to acquire skills and then apply them. They want to acquire the skills, apply them, and then learn new skills and apply them. So it's going to be a constant journey, a lifelong learning journey for a lot of them, which is great because learning is brilliant, and all of us do it in different ways, even now.
Yeah.
But I think the next generation, or the generations coming up, are already starting to do it and starting to look at it differently. So the year 11, year 12 cohorts are doing things interestingly in these schools and these organizations. And then they come up against university, and then it's back to the old school way of doing it. So I used to be quite critical of the university sector not keeping up with the trends. And when this opportunity came up, I said, okay, it's time to not just criticize and be an armchair critic and get in and try and do something about it. So what we're doing at Curtin is rethinking what lifelong learning might look like. There's a number of products, types of learning, micro-credential learning, short-form learning in various shapes and forms, vertically integrated projects where a degree might involve some part learning, some part experience, and back to some learning and back to experience. So organizations, employers are getting to meet the students earlier in the piece, and students are getting to work in the real world a little bit earlier. And one of the things for that is, if you come at it when you're in the first year of university, second year of university, you're still a bit green, and you're still thinking more out of left field. As you come out of a degree, you're starting to get closer and closer into a box, and you're starting to think outside, not thinking so much outside the box. And I think, well, we want that out of left field thinking. So getting them into industry earlier, I think, is going to be really helpful for the workforce as well.
That's very interesting. So I remember that some time ago I was having a conversation with a friend, and she mentioned about a school in Indonesia, it's a green school. And she mentioned that with such a passion that, to become curious and what is this not, etc. I ended up going to Ubud in Indonesia to take a look in green school and figure out what that was. The funny enough that I took my boys there, so and we could see the fear in their eyes when they thought, oh, dad's bringing us here to study in this place. So anyway, the absolutely fantastic, school with a different concept, as regional and as a still school of elite, but with a completely different, as a model. They came back. It was when I came back from that trip that it made me get closer to Space Cube as an ecosystem and talking with people like Beck and Nick. So they were still figuring out, or they didn't even know what Idea Academy would become, and we start talking about that. So this journey is fascinating. So today I was talking with a friend, and we talk about some numbers. In the year 12, in the K-12 now, the year 12 students getting out of year 12 to go to university. And the percentage of students going straight to universities, it doesn't stop falling. So it's falling and down and down and down. So students looking for alternatives in terms of going straight for a job or, whatever it is. Definitely different. And is actually, I'm very glad to hear that, it's a university like Curtin and others are looking at that and saying, what is that we need to change to be ready for this new group coming along. So that's very good. One of the things in this new cohort of students, let's say, and we mentioned about Idea Academy, so that's one of the pillars of what they're trying to educate students to is entrepreneurship, is the creative side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it become, but you mentioned about robots replacing humans in the more factory jobs as the more obvious place for the robots to start.
Yes.
So how is that a entrepreneurial ecosystem changing at university as an opportunity for the students?
I think Curtin always thought of itself as being an entrepreneurial university and continues to think about itself that way. And it's great to be part of a university that's not afraid to challenge the status quo and tries to push boundaries as they go about. Entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to nurture entrepreneurial skills in students, in humans, is critical. And I fundamentally believe that entrepreneurship will change lives and will change the world to be a better place. But we don't often teach people that. And for some, it's a bit more innate, and some, like me, fumble their way through, make mistakes, and learn the process. But there are a few fundamental building blocks in entrepreneurship education that I feel like every student needs to have. And it doesn't matter if they end up being a doctor or a researcher and will not leave their clinics or their labs or their surgeries. The entrepreneurial approach will still help them do what they're doing better. There are certain design thinking elements that are part of the fundamental building blocks of entrepreneurial education that are critical to help us think differently. It's like when we created the curriculums in schools and in universities where we structured education to be a certain way. There was a reason why there was this structure created, because we wanted people to fall in line and follow a process. If there was a factory and if there was a process that had to be followed, people needed to know that they fit into a certain mold. What we're now trying to do is you actually shouldn't have to fit into a mold, and you need to be able to think outside of those molds. So we're almost unraveling what we've done in education over the past 70, 80 years and trying to help people just be creative and allow themselves to be creative.
So that's so good to hear. So it feels like the students in the future won't feel like me doing university and being being the crazy person that don't want a job and is going to open this company. Also, how crazy this person is that don't want a job. So reality come back, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we've got a new Bachelor's of Innovation that we're going to launch in 2024. And the way the full Bachelor of Innovation. Yeah, and the way it's structured is you have your fixed core subjects that you do over your 3 or 4 years, but then the rest of it you pick from different faculties. You pick different skills and different expertise as you go along, but all of it wound into the spirit of entrepreneurship, the spirit of innovation. How do you keep challenging the status quo? How do you keep thinking differently with a view that you will create social impact, you will create good? And that's, I mean, it is bound into social entrepreneurship, but it's got an interesting Bachelor of Innovation title.
So good. So look, there is one thing in our ecosystem here in Perth, in Western Australia, which is, yes, the pie is small. So we do need to grow that pie. And one of the things we talk about around is how can we attract more people to our innovation ecosystem here. It could be companies that are based overseas and come to be based here. It could be talents and top students from other institutions that want to venture and want to see this place as a possibility. So what do you think, how would be your pitch to attract people to this place?
300 days of sunshine. That's I think the WA tourism pitch.
That's the first one. That's important.
The lifestyle is great, but I think the opportunity in my mind is even greater. And in the past, historically, Australia has always looked west, and it's looked to Europe and to America as being the opportunity. But the opportunity quite clearly lies north, with 60% of the globe's population sitting within 2 hours of Perth's GMT plus 8 time zone. It just makes a perfect opportunity for us to be looking at our neighbors in the north, around the Indian Ocean, and say, here's the opportunity. By 2030, and this is just from an education snapshot alone, by 2030, 80% of the students or learners going to higher education are going to be from non-OECD countries, primarily from Asia and Africa. And currently, 80% of the top 1,000 universities are located within the OECD countries, not in Asia or Africa. And so there's going to be a significant change and movement. And that might not be physical movement, it's where you learn doesn't really matter as long as you get the content, right? And so there's going to be a significant movement of people around the globe. And that's the opportunity that lies with Perth. We sit on the Indian Ocean rim. There's 57 countries on the Indian Ocean rim. All of these countries just starting to bloom. The economies are starting to develop. This is where the opportunity lies. And so if we can position ourselves as being this perfectly geolocated, we've got huge advantages from a space perspective. Our geolocation is brilliant. It helps us in that. Our location close to Asia and this thriving population makes a difference. We're across from Africa, which is a significantly huge growing economy and potential. That gives us an opportunity. So all of these, I think, are it's really begging for us to take the initiative to say, hey, Perth is in it, and we're going to really create change. And if you want to be part of that change, come to Perth.
Absolutely. So I love your pitch. So I'm already bought in so before the pitch, so I'm easy one to get along. But yes, it is one of the challenges, how to articulate that story of why Perth. Chandra, the beauty of our show is that it's so entertaining that at least for me, I get so into it that we get to the close of it very quick. So it's 30 minutes and it passes. So I'll ask you like a closing question. So for you in this space, again, paraphrasing myself at the beginning, so you are a living role model as a guest of innovation, diversity, and education. So if your kids, I know you have young kids, but if your kids were a little bit older, they will be soon, and they asking questions about, Dad, what should I do? So professionally wise. So what would be your answer?
Find your dreams. Find your own dreams. I grew up in a middle class family in India, but I still had the luxury of not being told what to do. I was lucky enough, I was reasonably okay academically, and I managed to get into an engineering program and so on and so forth. But at one point, I wanted to study literature. And if I'd done that, I would have been supported to do that. And I think I might still have ended up here, who knows?
Yeah.
But I feel like if you if you scaffold them with everything that they need to succeed in life, I feel like the kids would just find their way. And particularly, like I spoke earlier about this new generation, this new breed of human beings that we've created, they're gonna change the world, and in my mind, change the world to be a better place. So I just want them to be part of that and take that journey one step at a time and figure it out, make their own mistakes. I'm there if they need a shoulder to cry on, or a helping hand if they need it. But otherwise, go forth. The world is theirs.
I love that. So everyone, this is Chandra, our guest of today. So I have been very fortunate, I am very grateful for the guests that I have in the show. So I was teasing Chandra a little bit earlier about the collaboration in the ecosystem, but there is no doubt whatsoever of what's going on in Perth. So we have at least 2 major initiatives with Mesh Points, and now with the WA team participating in the MIT REAP program, which is collaboration in the core. So I do think that transformation is coming to WA, coming to Perth. So we've been part of it. So, and today was fantastic to have Chandra with us. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm sure we'll do. Chandra, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. No, it's been great to be part of the show, and it's always fun. I really enjoy conversations with Wilson, and this has been no different. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Very good. So for you, listen to us. So until the next episode of Changing the Game, and thanks for listening.